Previously on Transformers University, way back ago, back in episode 10, we went by the numbers, breaking down the tech specs, functions, and mold count for 1984. And now we're going to do the same in 1985, right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind the website TFU.INFO and all the associated social media that goes with it. If you're listening to the show right now as it drops, then you know I am presently at New York Comic-Con 2018. So please swing on by to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, and subscribe for all the latest from me at New York Comic Con. You can also follow along on Twitter at TFU_info. Today, we are at episode something like 36.
Something like 36?
Lower your voice.
Wait, what is that anyway? Something like 36? Does that include me?
And we're going to do something we haven't done since way back in episode number 10, and that is go behind the numbers. Now, what I like to do here is break down for you just a few things numerically, some fun with the tech spec numbers from the back of the box, some fun with the functions and bios for the characters, also from the packaging, and break down the number of molds, new molds, retools, redecos that we see from each year. And 1985 is a particularly unique year because the 84 molds were resold that year as well. So we will not be counting them in this conversation. If you want more in the 84 molds, like I said, go back to episode number 10 where we did that one. And if you need a breakdown of the figures we'll be talking about from 1985, back in episode 15 I covered the 85 Autobot toys, and episode 20 I covered the Decepticons from that year as well. Now there are a few groups in here that don't have proper tech specs, and they're worth noting, and I'll explain here exactly how I will handle those within the confines of this episode. So the Omnibots, which were mail-away Autobot cars, they had tech specs in Japan. They had unpublished ones in the US, but for the sake of this, we're going to go with the published versions that were in Japan, translated as I could find the numbers on tfwiki.net. And the functions I've had on the site, I'm not entirely sure where I got them from, because they don't match the ones from TFWiki, but they were from a reliable source whenever I added them into the site. I did not just pull them out of thin air. We also have Mini Spies and Power Dashers, mail-away figures that did not have any sort of tech specs, though the Power Dashers did have a function, and I will count the Mini Spies just as spies. We'll also talk a little bit more about them when we get to the mold section of this episode. And finally, internationally, there's a bit of confusion, or I should say uncertainty. There's a bit of uncertainty around when things came out in certain parts of the world. When things came out in certain parts of the world, 85 or 86. For the sake of this program, I am only going to count things that came out in 1985 in the U.S. and North America, basically. Some of those fun international variants I mentioned a few episodes back with Mexico and Canada. We're not talking about those in this episode, especially when we get to the molds later on. Now we're going to start with the breakdown of the functions for the Autobots and Decepticons in 1985. And as with the last episode, I've kind of built these functions to fall within 5 different types of buckets, and I'm sure they could be expanded, but I really want to keep things fairly general with how this works. So the buckets are command. This is leadership roles. So This I will base, basically, most of this is always based on the wording of the function, though I do take the rank number that we'll get to later on into account as well. So command is leadership. Pretty straightforward. People that are commanders or leaders within the factions. Infantry, those are the front side soldiers. Engineering, that tends to be more either scientific or specialized functions. Intelligence is mainly forms of data gathering and communications and information gathering. And then finally, medical. So that is kind of the basic 5 groups I've placed all of the characters from 1985 into. And so, with the Autobots, there are a number of new characters in the Autobots. And also worth noting here before I do get a little deeper, all of the mini spies are just considered one, and all of the power dashers are also just considered one because they all have the same function as far as I'm concerned. And the mini spies especially, since they're meant to be these nondescript characters, I didn't want to break them down into their 40 or 50 something variant versions. I had that number at some point, but go back to the 85 Autobots episode and you'll see what I mean about the mini spies. So with the Autobots, they add 3 more at the command level, which they only had one in 1984, and that was Optimus Prime. In 85, they add Grimlock, the Dinobot commander, Jetfire, the Air Guardian, who is one I took into... I actually changed him from infantry to command because Air Guardian really felt like more of an infantry kind of role, but his rank is 10, so I can't not put him in command, in the command group. And then finally, Roadbuster, the deluxe Autobot, who is ground assault commander. There are 6 new members of the engineering group: Beachcomber, the geologist; Grapple, the architect; Inferno, who does search and rescue; Perceptor, who is a scientist;
Batman's a scientist;
Twin Twist, who does demolitions; and then the Power Dashers, who function is multifunction specialist. So as a specialization group, that's where they would fall in. In the Autobots infantry, there are 11 new entries in this area. The Defense Base, Omega Supreme; the Warriors, Powerglide, Trax, and Warpath; Sea Spray with Naval Defense; most of the Dinobots, Slag, Sludge, and Snarl and Swoop. Actually, all the Dinobots that aren't Grimlock all fit into this infantry category and have very specialized functions. Slag is a flamethrower. Sludge is a jungle warrior and demolition, so he could actually fall into the engineering realm. Snarl is a desert warrior, and Swoop is the bombardier. The other Jumpstarter, Topspin, also in this group as land and sea assault, and Whirl as aerial assault infantry. In the intelligence pool for the Autobots, we are adding 9 new members. The aforementioned mini spies are certainly in this group. Blaster, who is communications, and Cosmos, who is reconnaissance and communications. The Omnibot Camshaft is the scout. Downshift, another Omnibot, is a security agent, and that also brings in Overdrive, the third Omnibot, as a strategist. Red Alert, the security director; Skids, the theoretician; and Smokescreen, the diversionary tactician. And finally, the last of the Autobots, the only one I can really feel like I could put into the medical bin, was Hoist, who does maintenance, and you can probably put him somewhere halfway between medical and engineering, but for the sake of this project, we will put him in engineering. Now, with the Decepticons, it's a fairly even breakdown of engineering, infantry, and intelligence. There are 6 new members in each of those, but we will start with command. Now, I find 2 new commanders in the Decepticons in 85 versus 84, which also had 2 in Megatron and Starscream. This one has Shockwave being added to the command group as military operations commander, and oddly enough, Blitzwing as ground and air commander. In the engineering pool, there are 6 additions. 5 of them are Constructicons, and that would be Bone Crusher, Longhaul, Mixmaster, Scavenger, and Scrapper. The 6th Constructicon, Hook, I put in the medical group, and is the only one in the medical group as Surgical Engineer. And the Decepticons didn't have a medic in 84, and there's not a lot of characters that kind of fit that whole medic vibe, so we're going to put Hook as the medic. Rounding out the engineering group, the 6th member there is actually Astrotrain as military transport. In the infantry group, there are 6 new entries. 5 of them are warriors, and 3 of those 5 are the new jets: Ramjet, Dirge, and Thrust. Also in that warrior pool is the combined form of Devastator and the deluxe Insecticon Ransack. Also falling into the infantry pool, just like I did with 84, there is a gunner in the Decepticons now, and that is the deluxe Insecticon Barrage. Now, in the intelligence pool, once again, we have the mini spies. They're the first entry of the 6 in here, and the rest of these are Insecticons. The 3 main Insecticons, Bombshell, Kickback, and Shrapnel. Shrapnel is electronic warfare, Kickback is espionage, and then Bombshell is psychological warfare. Another deluxe Insecticon in Venom, who also has a function of psychological warfare, and I threw Chop Shop, the thief, into intelligence because that kind of is akin to spycraft. So that's how these characters break down for me as far as how they group together. And if that helps you organize or display some of your figures on a shelf, then it's one way you can actually look at them. I don't think I've ever done that, but I think it'd be a neat way to kind of reorganize a collection. If you've ever done that, reach out to me, info@TFU.INFO, or on Twitter @TFU_info, and let me know. It'd be cool to see some pictures of that. Now, moving on to Strength. Strength is the first category on the tech spec card, so that's where we will start. And worth noting here that mini spies and power dashers do not have any tech spec numbers, so they will be out of the running as far as the rest of this portion of the show goes. So starting with the Autobots, leading them in the strength category, they have 2 Autobots with a strength of 10. One is Grimlock, the Dinobot commander, and the other is Omega Supreme. So in theory, they are equally as strong as each other despite Omega's size advantage. And both of those clock in at a strength of 10. Just below that, leading the engineering group, Inferno has a strength of 9. And in the intelligence group, and this character really does have some jacked stats. And again, I'm using the Japanese numbers for him, and that is the Omnibot strategist Overdrive, who has a strength rating of 9. There's a few more in the infantry field that have a strength of 9. 3 of the Dinobots, Slag, Sludge, and Snarl, along with Warpath, the tank. And just to chime in with the 1 medical field entry, Hoist has a strength of 8. And the Autobot with the lowest strength rating at a 2 is Cosmos, the UFO. On the Decepticon side, there are 2 Decepticons as well with a strength rating of 10. Devastator and Shockwave, so that takes care of infantry and command respectively. With 9, there are 3 in the engineering pool: Astrotrain, Bone Crusher, and Longhaul. In the medical pool, there is a strength of 8 for Hook, who will be the 1 entry in the medical pool. And from the intelligence pool, the highest strength rating in that group is Chop Shop with a strength of 7. From brute strength and brawn, we go to brains. Let's break down intelligence next.
I am too smart I am too smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T.
In the intelligence category, we have 2 in the Autobot side coming in at 10s, and that would be Jetfire, who fits the command block, and Perceptor, who's in the engineering pool, and that would be 2 fairly obvious entries, I think. And then in the intelligence pool, leading intelligence, once again with those jack stats, is the Omnibot Overdrive, coming in at 9.5. From the infantry group, there's nobody ranked at a 9, but there are 2 sitting at 8. Sea Spray, the Minibot, along with Whirl, the Autobot, the deluxe Autobot, both coming in at 8s. On the dumb side of the Autobots, oddly enough, not loaded with Dinobots at the bottom. 2 of the Dinobots, in fact, have an intelligence rating of 6, and that would be Snarl and Swoop. Grimlock is further up that chain at 7. Slag comes in at a 4 alongside the Jumpstarter Twin Twist, but the lowest number for intelligence goes to Sludge, the Brontosaurus Jungle Warrior Demolitions Infantry Autobot, at a 3. And in the medical group for the Autobots, Hoist comes in at a 6. For the Decepticon side, we have Shockwave, once again at the top with a 10, leading all groups and the command group, followed by Hook at a 9. So there's your medical entry for the Decepticons. And also at a 9, 2 more members of the intelligence community for the Decepticons, Kickback and Venom, both there again at 9. For the infantry, Barrage the Gunner comes in at an 8. And for the Decepticons engineering pool, also at an 8, Scrapper the Constructicon. And the least smart of the Decepticons, coming in with intelligence numbers of 2, the combined form of the Constructicons, Devastator, and I guess his brain must rule the 6, the Constructicon Scavenger, also with an intelligence of 2, and not too far away, Bone Crusher with an intelligence of 3. Now, let's talk about speed.
I saw this in a movie about a bus that had to speed around the city, keeping its speed over 50. And if its speed dropped, it would explode. I think it was called The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down.
And for what he lacks in strength, he doesn't lack in speed. Cosmos does need to be able to get into outer space, so his speed is ranked at a 10 alongside Jetfire, who, as we mentioned in the previous episode, is one of the other Autobots who can get into outer space. That takes care of the intelligence and the command pools. And once again, just worth noting, the only other 9 in this group is Overdrive and his jack stats. For the infantry corps, there are 4 8s tied for the lead, and that would be Powerglide, the Jet, Swoop, the robotic Pterodactyl, Topspin, the land and sea thing, and Whirl, the helicopter. From the engineering group, the fastest one there with a 7 is the other Jumpstarter, Twin Twist. Oddly enough, Omega Supreme has a speed rating of 3, despite having a space shuttle. But he is not the slowest Autobot in 1985. In fact, there are 4 Autobots with a rating of 2. Blaster, the Boombox, Perceptor, the Scientist, both which make sense since they turn into household objects, and that speed rating would probably be based on their ability to run. Also in there is Sludge, the Brontosaurus, and Warpath, the tank. On the Decepticon side, once again, the spacefaring Decepticons have higher numbers. Well, not all of them, but Astrotrain leads the pack at 10 For the engineering group, Blitzwing actually leads the command group at 9. Shockwave only has a speed of 7, though in some continuities he does turn into a flying space gun. Also with speeds of 9, 2 of the 3 Seekers from 1985, Ramjet and Thrust with 9s, and Dirge just behind them with an 8. For the intelligence group, there is a big gap between speeds here. There's actually nobody between the numbers of 5 and 7. So there's a 7 with Shockwave, but there is nobody with a 6 or a 5, and only one at a high 4, and that is Bombshell, who would lead the Insecticon, all the Insecticons really, on speed with 4.75. Almost all the rest have 4s or 3s, but the slowest of the Decepticons in 1985 is the lumbering giant Devastator with a 1. Also worth noting are medical professionals on both sides here. Hoist has a speed rating of 3, while Hook has a speed rating also 3. And from there we will move on to Endurance. In terms of endurance, Grimlock leads the pack here and is part of the command group with a 10, alongside Omega Supreme and Sludge from the infantry group, who also have 10s. There's a handful of 9s. Roadbuster, because I haven't mentioned him and he is part of that command group, has a 9. And then the rest of the Dinobots, Slag, Snarl, and Swoop, are in that group, alongside the Omnibot Downshift, who would be the highest endurance character from the intelligence pool. From the engineering pool, the highest one there would be Inferno with an 8. From the medical pool, not too far behind, with a 7, would be Hoist. And most of these numbers are pretty high for the Autobots. There is only one character here with a lower than 5 number, and that would be the Autobot Architect Grapple, who has a 4. On the Decepticon side, no 10s here, but 3 9s to start, and that would be the Constructicon Long Haul, Devastator, the combined form of the Constructicons, and Ramjet the Warrior, all coming in the top with 9, and that covers the engineering and infantry pools. The intelligence pool, their highest number is a 7, and that would be Shrapnel. For the medical group, Hook comes in with a 6, and for the command group, Blitzwing actually comes in at an 8. On the low end of this, with a 4 in endurance, the Insecticon Kickback. From here, we go to rank. So, of the highest ranking Autobots, 3 of the 4 that come out near the top with 8 or 9s. Actually, there's 5, 8 or higher. 3 of those 5 are in that command pool. So are that command pool. Jetfire with a rank of 10, Grimlock with a rank of 9, and Roadbuster with a rank of 8. Now, surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, going off of the rest of this episode, the Omnibot Overdrive and his jacked stats are up there with a 9, which I believe in the Japanese BIOS, he is the leader of the Omnibots. So that takes care of the command and intelligence pools. For the engineering pools, there are 2 folks in the engineering pool with 7 as their rank, and that is Grapple and Perceptor. And for the infantry, Omega Supreme has the highest rank with a 7. Lots of 5s and 6s. The lowest rank, though, is split 4 ways at 4. It's interesting to note here that the ranks of 3 of the Dinobots are 4, and that is Slag, Sludge, and Snarl. And despite the fact that 2 of them are classified as warriors, which usually if the function is warrior, it is an automatic 5. Hoist also, for the medical group, has a 4 as his rank. Oddly enough, Swoop, the remaining Dinobot in this conversation, has a rank of 5. So that technically makes him second in command of the Dinobots. Might not want to tell the others. On the Decepticon side, Shockwave, once again, leads the column with a 9. And oddly enough, the other one in the command group, Blitzwing, who is ground and air commander, only has a rank of 6, which is odd and seems like a typo. For the intelligence pool, the highest ranking Insecticon is in fact Venom with a rank of 7.5, just ahead of Kickback at 7. For the engineering group, Astrotrain leads with a 6. And for the infantry, oddly enough, the the highest ranking member is Devastator with a 6 as well. And that is strange because 5 out of the 6 Constructicons have a rank of 4 and all pull up the bottom of this list, with Hook in the medical group and the other 4 being in the engineering group. The only Constructicon with a rank higher than 4 is Scrapper with a rank of 5, which is probably why he is usually shown as the leader of the Constructicons in the G1 cartoon. From rank, we go to courage.
What makes the muskrat guard his musk? Courage. What makes the Sphinx the seventh wonder? Courage. What makes the dawn come up like thunder? Courage. What makes the Hottentot so hot? What puts the ape in apricot? What have they got that I ain't got? Courage. You could say that again.
Now, it's probably fun to mention here that the Autobot side of this is weighted very heavily towards the top. There is not one Autobot with a courage less than 6, and I would say more than half are at 8 or above. There are 5 with courages of 10, including 2 of the command group in Grimlock and Roadbuster. Jetfire has a 9. And 3 of the infantry group at 10, with Omega Supreme, Sea Spray, and Topspin coming in at 10. From the engineering side of things, Inferno and Twin Twist sit atop the courage board at 9. And from the intelligence group, Blaster also has a courage of 9. And for keeping score at home, Hoist, the one lonely medical guy, is a courage of 8. The 3 unfortunate Autobots do have 6 as their really low courage number. Would be Beachcomber, the geologist, Trax, the warrior, and Downshift, one of the Omnibots, the security agent, all sitting at 6. On the Decepticon side, courages of 10 for 2 of the members of the infantry pool, the Deluxe Insecticon Barrage, and Devastator, the combined form of the Constructicons. For command, Shockwave leads once again with a 9, and as part of the intelligence group, Venom, the other Deluxe Insecticon, sits also at a 9. For the engineering pool, at 8.5, the Constructicon Scavenger. And for the medical pool, Hook has a courage of 6. At the bottom of the Decepticons, 2 of the Seekers are pretty cowardly. Dirge and Thrust sit there with a 4, as opposed to Ramjet, who has a courage of 8, probably because his bio says he likes to just crash into things. All right, moving on to firepower. Once again, starting with the Autobots, there are 3 in the Autobots that have perfect 10s for firepower, and 2 you would expect. 1 is a member of command, and that is Grimlock. 1 is the giant defense base Omega Supreme, and the other is the jump starter Topspin, who has a firepower of 10. So that takes care of the infantry and command pools. From the engineering side, the leader in firepower is someone you would not expect.
Batman?
No, he's a scientist.
Batman's a scientist.
It's not Batman.
And that is the Autobot scientist Perceptor, with a firepower of 8. And from the intelligence group, also with a firepower of 8, the Omnibot Camshaft. Most of the Autobots sit at about a 7 or an 8. And there's a big gap here again in that the lowest after the number 5 are the 3 lowest overall with a rating of 1. And that would be Beachcomber, the geologist, which makes sense. And then 2 of the Dinobots, Sludge and Snarl, both having fire powers of 1. On the Decepticon side, no surprises here. Shockwave has a 9. Nobody has a 10, but Shockwave has a 9, being that he turns into a giant space gun. That shouldn't surprise anyone. And then 2 members of the infantry group, Barrage the Gunner, who should have a firepower of 9 if he's going to be a gunner, and Ransack, one of the other deluxe Insecticons, also has a firepower of 9. From the intelligence group, Shrapnel has a firepower of 8, alongside Venom, who also has a firepower of 8. And on the engineering side, there are 2 with firepowers of 7. That would be Longhaul and Mixmaster. Hook does not have the lowest, despite being the medical number here at 6. His fellow Constructicon, Scrapper, has the lowest firepower number at 5. And if you're wondering where Hoist was for the Autobots, he is also a 6. And finally, the final category on the tech spec card, skill.
Got to flex that skill, young friends, I want to kill.
On the Autobot side, from the bottom of firepower to the top of skill, one of 4 that have a skill rating of 10. Beachcomber, part of the engineering group, along with Perceptor, both having skill levels of 10. And Grimlock for the command group, also a skill level of 10. Jetfire actually has a skill level of 9. Leading the infantry group, Warpath also has a skill level of 10. And for the intelligence group, there are 4 with a skill level of 9. Blaster, Cosmos, Smokescreen, and Downshift. Hoist, from the medical group, this is one field he is excelling in. He has a skill level of 9 as well. Of the Autobots lacking skills, the very bottom of this group, the Dinobot Snarl, with a skill of 4. On the Decepticon side, pair of 10s leading the pack, 1 being Hook of the medical group, the only one in the medical group, and that kind of parallels what we have with Hoist. With his high skill level, Hook has a 10 in the skill category, alongside Chop Shop for the intelligence group, who also has a skill level of 10. Shockwave, once again, shockingly leads the command group with a skill of 9. And for the engineering side of things, Mixmaster and Scrapper both have skills of 9. For the infantry corps, Dirge, despite his cowardly 4 courage, has a skill level of 9 as well. Bringing up the rear of the skills, Devastator, the combined warrior form of the Constructicons, along with the Constructicon Longhaul, sitting at the bottom, skills of 4. And that is how the tech spec numbers break down, and there's some interesting things to extract from that. Winners and losers, if you will. For the Autobots, Grimlock has 4 10s, as does Omega Supreme. However, Grimlock has a 9 in the category as well, which Omega does not. And the Omnibot Overdrive, again with his jacked stats, has nothing below a 7. 4 categories at 9 or higher. For the losers on the Autobot side, Sludge, oh man, he is at the bottom of 4 categories out of the 8, but out of the remaining 4, he has 9 or higher in 3 of those categories, like giving him the most varied and weird line out of anything in 1985. And if you want to be mired in mediocrity, the Autobot car, Red Alert, I haven't said his name since I mentioned him at the beginning, because he does not lead or trail at the bottom of a single category. He is the only one out of all of these characters mentioned that does not do that. On the Decepticon side, the clear winner is Shockwave, who has a 9 or higher in 6 of the 8 categories, including a pair of 10s. And the loser, and again, this is the one who has the most categories at the bottom, and that is Devastator. The combined form of the Constructicons has sits at the bottom of 3 of the 8 categories, but he also sits near the top with a 9 or 10 in 3 of those categories as well. It's also fun to note that Devastator is the highest ranking Constructicon at a 6, so he outranks all of the individual members that make him up. Now, from the fiction to the actual real world of the toys that contain these biographies. So, of the molds released in 1985, and once again, let's talk about how I'm breaking this down. The mini spies themselves will count as just 4 molds, and I am not counting the redecos in white or yellow or blue. There's 3 colors, white, yellow, blue, and there's also a hubcap variant and whatnot. Those are essentially the redecos for all of 85. There are no straight up redecos in 85, so the only things recolored are the mini spies, so we're not really going to talk about that. The Power Dashers, since there are 3 very different toolings and molds, we're going to use those as individual entries as well. Once again, I'm not talking about anything from the international portion of 1985, so no Mexican variants, no Canadian variants, and anything else from South America is probably 1986, at least for the purposes of this show, so we are not going to talk about that here either. But let's talk about what was released in 1985. Of original molds, 47 original molds in 85. That's just over double the 23 that were released in 84. No straight up redecos, not counting those mini spies, whereas there were 6 redecos in 1984. And in 84 there were only 2 retoolings, but in 85 there were 7, 4 Autobots, 3 Decepticons, all from Diaclone molds. 1 retool, depending on which one you want to consider came first. Both came in 1985, and that would be the Inferno Grapple combination. One of them is, you can consider the original, one you consider the retool. Whichever one you want to consider, that's up to you. Of the other 3 Autobots to be retooled that year, Hoist, retooled from Trailbreaker, Red Alert, retooled from Sideswipe, and Smokescreen, retooled from Blue Streak and Prowl. The 3 Decepticon retoolings are the Seeker Jets, the Coneheads as people like to call them, Thrust Dirge, Ramjet, all retools of Starscream, essentially. And again, those are all 7 are Diaclone molds, and that is how the numbers break down for 1985. And with that, we are going to close out this episode of Transformers University. Once again, if you're listening to this on the day it came out, I am likely at New York Comic Con, so please check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, and on Twitter at TFU_info. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe, ring the bell, and become part of the YouTube community around TFU.info, as everything from this podcast eventually ends up there, unless it's a Patreon exclusive. Now, if you want to join the Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.info, little as $1 a month will get you tons of exclusive content and lots of insight into how the show is put together. And you also get to help out as special production assistants, let's say it that way, with things I have going on, such as New York Comic Con. Now, if you want to catch me on the rest of social media, Facebook, Instagram, the username is TFU.INFO. So either one of those, .com/TFU.INFO. And of course, on the web, www.tfu.info for the world's longest running Transforming Toy Archive. Once again, I am your host, Anthony Brucali. Next time on the show, we're going to get back into the G1 cartoon, talk another 5 episodes of Season 2 on the back end as we try to wrap up a lot of cartoons in 1985. Until then, see ya.